I never meant to find the letter. That's what I keep telling myself as I sit in the cramped attic room, watching shadows stretch and twist across the faded wallpaper. Thornfield Manor groans around me, each creak of old wood carrying the weight of secrets buried long before my time here. The envelope in my trembling hands bears the initials AR in an elegant yet unfamiliar script. Adelaide Rochester. A name that lingers in my mind like a whispered warning. It began 3 days ago. As the housekeeper of Thornfield Manor, it's my responsibility to ensure the estate's every corner remains immaculate, though it's been years since Lord Rochester last visited. The master bedroom, once grand and imposing, had fallen into quiet neglect. The heavy drapes shrouded the room in perpetual dusk, the air thick with the scent of aged mahogany and dust. I was inspecting the floorboards near the grand Victorian fireplace. Their creaking had grown louder lately when my hand brushed against a loose board. It shifted beneath my fingers, the sound it made unlike the usual groan of old wood. It was hollow, deliberate, as if hiding something meant only for the finder. My breath quickened as I pried it up. Dust motes swirled in the muted afternoon light, dancing like tiny conspirators around my discovery. There, nestled between the joists, was an envelope wrapped in oilcloth, untouched by the decay of time. I should have left it, sealed the board back and pretended I'd never seen it. But curiosity has always been my weakness. Ever since I was a child reading Gothic novels by candlelight, I've been drawn to the unknown, the unexplained. And now, standing alone in the silence of Thornfield Manor, who else would ensure that this piece of history reached the right hands? I carefully unwrapped the oilcloth, revealing an envelope yellowed with age but perfectly preserved. The wax seal, bearing the initials AR, was already broken. With trembling fingers, I unfolded the letter inside. The words, written in an elegant yet hurried hand, sent a shiver down my spine. My dearest Thomas, if you are reading this, I am already dead. What they will tell you about my passing is a lie. The truth lies buried in the rose garden, beneath the stone angel's watchful gaze. For the sake of your soul and mine, you must uncover it before the next full moon. With my eternal love, Adelaide Rochester. The letter was dated April 15, 1888. My hands shook as I read it again. Adelaide Rochester. The name was unfamiliar, yet her words seemed to resonate within the very walls of this house. I had worked at Thornfield Manor for 5 years, and in all that time, I had never once heard of Adelaide Rochester. The current Lord Rochester's grandfather, Thomas, was known to have married a woman named Catherine. But Adelaide's name was conspicuously absent from any family record. The rose garden was still there, its blooms well past their prime in the autumn chill. The stone angel stood sentinel over it, its features weathered smooth by decades of rain and wind. But why had Adelaide's truth been buried there, and what could possibly warrant such secrecy? I tried to dismiss the letter as an elaborate hoax, yet something about the handwriting, the hurried ink strokes and the blotches where the pen had pressed too hard, spoke of genuine urgency. This was not the work of a prankster. It was the plea of a woman desperate to ensure her story was not lost to time. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house seemed amplified, each gust of wind a whisper through the attic's drafty windows. My small room felt oppressive, the shadows playing tricks on my mind. And then, just as I was drifting into an uneasy slumber, I heard it. Footsteps. They echoed faintly, coming from the master bedroom directly above me, but I knew for certain that I had locked that door before retiring for the night. The next morning, determined to make sense of the letter, I ventured into the manor's library. It was a vast room, lined with shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling, their contents gathering dust in the absence of any eager reader. The air smelled of aged leather and paper, a scent that always carried a sense of reverence and mystery. I pulled down ledger after ledger, searching for any mention of Adelaide Rochester, but her name was nowhere to be found. The family records showed a curious gap between 1887 and 1889. Pages had been meticulously removed, leaving no trace of who might have done it or why. Frustration gnawed at me as I sifted through photograph albums and journals, all of which seemed to deliberately avoid that period. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase Adelaide from history. Mrs. Fairfax, the Manor's cook and one of its longest-serving staff members, found me amidst the chaos of books and papers. Her usually kind expression was clouded with unease. "Emily," she said softly, "some things are best left undisturbed." I held up the letter, its words etched into my mind. "Do you know who Adelaide Rochester was?" Her face paled. She glanced at the letter but quickly looked away, muttering something about preparing dinner before hurrying out of the library. Her reaction only deepened my resolve. What was she afraid of? By the time evening fell, the letter's words had taken on an almost hypnotic power over me. I stood by my attic window, staring out at the rose garden bathed in pale moonlight. The stone angel's shadow stretched across the lawn, impossibly long, pointing like an accusatory finger. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a figure standing beneath it, but when I blinked, the garden was empty. I tried to convince myself that my imagination was running wild. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the house felt alive around me. It creaked and groaned, the wind howled, and I could almost swear I heard whispers in the dark. Tomorrow, I would have to decide. Do I dare disturb a secret that someone went to great lengths to bury? Or do I owe it to Adelaide to uncover the truth she risked everything to preserve? As the clock in the hall struck midnight, I found myself staring once more at the letter on my bedside table. The words seemed to pulse in the dim light, urging me toward the rose garden. Whatever lay beneath the stone angel had waited over a century to be discovered, and with each passing moment, I felt the weight of time pressing down on me, as though the house itself demanded an answer. Some truths refused to stay buried. The library of Thornfield Manor had always intimidated me. Its towering shelves seemed to loom overhead, their dusty tomes full of stories I would never have the time to read. Yet today, it felt like the library had drawn me in, offering a path forward in my search for answers. Somewhere in this labyrinth of leather-bound volumes and forgotten ledgers, I hoped to find a trace of Adelaide Rochester. Hours passed as I combed through the records. The heavy silence was broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards and the steady tick of the grandfather clock near the entrance. Most of the documents I found were mundane: financial accounts, property deeds, and guest registries from long-forgotten social gatherings. Yet, every time I thought I was close to uncovering something relevant, I hit a dead end. Adelaide's name remained elusive, a ghost haunting the periphery of the manor's history. It wasn't until I pulled down a ledger from the highest shelf that I found something intriguing. Tucked between its pages was a smaller notebook, its leather cover cracked with age. There was no title, no indication of its contents. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. The handwriting inside matched the letter. April 3rd, 1888. Thomas insists we maintain appearances, but I can no longer bear the weight of pretense. The sounds from the East Wing continue, though he claims not to hear them. Catherine's portrait watches me during dinner, her eyes following me as I move. I know what they did to her, what they'll do to me if... The entry ended abruptly, a dark ink blot obscuring the final words. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Each entry painted a picture of a woman unraveling, her life overshadowed by fear and secrets too terrible to name. Yet there were gaps in her narrative, as though entire days or weeks had been erased from her memory or deliberately omitted. A sudden creak behind me made me whirl around, clutching the notebook to my chest. Mrs. Fairfax stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here, Emily," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some things in this house are better left undisturbed." "Who was Adelaide?" I demanded, holding up the notebook. "Why is she missing from the records? What happened to her?" Mrs. Fairfax hesitated, her eyes darting to the shadows pooling in the corners of the room. "My grandmother worked here when Adelaide was alive," she admitted. She used to tell me stories, but they were just that. Stories. Adelaide was troubled, and Catherine wasn't what she seemed." Before I could press her further, the library door slammed shut between us. There had been no wind, no draft, just the sudden, deliberate thud of wood against wood. By the time I reopened the door, Mrs. Fairfax was gone, and the hallway was empty. As the silence closed in around me, I returned to the notebook, flipping through its remaining pages. Adelaide wrote of clandestine meetings in the Rose Garden, of letters exchanged in secret, and of a plan she had to enact before they discovered her intentions. The more I read, the clearer it became that Adelaide's fears weren't just the imaginings of a paranoid mind. She had uncovered something dangerous. That evening, I found myself drawn to the East Wing, a part of the manor sealed off for renovations long before my arrival. Among the keys on my ring was one that I had always assumed was useless, its brass surface tarnished and forgotten. On a whim, I tried it on the East Wing's heavy oak door. To my surprise, the lock clicked open with ease. The air inside was heavy, stale with the scent of abandonment. My flashlight illuminated wallpaper patterned with roses and thorns, their designs seeming to shift in the flickering light. The floorboards creaked beneath my steps, as though protesting my intrusion. Each room I passed held remnants of a bygone era: covered furniture, shattered mirrors, and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow me. In the third room, I found it. A portrait wrapped in yellowed sheets, its outline unmistakable. With trembling hands, I pulled the fabric away. Catherine Rochester's image stared back at me, her beauty as severe as it was captivating. Yet her eyes held an unsettling quality, as though she were aware of my presence. Beneath the portrait lay a photograph, its edges curled with age. It depicted two women standing beside the stone angel in the rose garden. One was unmistakably Catherine, her stern expressions softened by youth. The other could only be Adelaide, her face alight with defiance. On the back, written in the same hand as the letter, "Remember your promise. A." A sudden draft swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight. In the darkness, I felt the weight of Catherine's gaze, her painted eyes burning into me. When I finally managed to relight the torch, the portrait's expression had changed. She was smiling now. Thornfield Manor had always been a house of contradictions, elegant and oppressive, a sanctuary that felt like a trap. Tonight, as I retraced my steps to the East Wing, I was reminded just how alive the manor could feel. Each floorboard groaned beneath my weight. Each gust of wind seemed to whistle through unseen cracks, carrying whispers of a history I was only beginning to uncover. Catherine's diary burned in my hands as I approached the heavy oak door at the far end of the corridor. The brass key I'd found on my keyring earlier felt unnaturally cold in my pocket, as if repelling the warmth of my palm. When I slid it into the lock, the tumblers clicked too easily, as though the door had been waiting for me. Beyond the threshold, the East Wing was an echo of another era. Dust and decay had claimed much of its grandeur, but its walls still held the remnants of a once vibrant space. My flashlight illuminated faded wallpaper, its intricate patterns of roses and thorns seeming to shift as I moved. Furniture lay covered in sheets, their ghostly forms adding to the sense of abandonment. I pressed forward, feeling the weight of the diary grow heavier with each step. The room where I had discovered Catherine's portrait seemed to call to me, its doorway gaping like a maw in the dim light. When I stepped inside, the air changed. It was colder here, as though the room had been untouched by sunlight for decades. The portrait hung exactly as I had left it, its frame gleaming faintly in the flicker of my flashlight. Catherine's painted eyes bore into me, their knowing gaze almost daring me to look away. Her smile, had it changed again? It was wider now, the corners of her lips curling in a way that felt sinister, mocking. I turned my attention to the hidden recess behind the portrait, where I had found her diary. A thorough search revealed no further clues, but the space still felt significant, as though it held a memory too faint for me to grasp. The sound of my breathing filled the room, and then something else. A low hum, barely perceptible at first, rose from the floor beneath my feet. It wasn't mechanical but organic, like a deep, resonant vibration. I crouched down, placing my hand against the cold floorboards. The hum grew louder, and I realized it wasn't just a sound, it was a pulse. I quickly stood, my heart racing as I scanned the room. Nothing moved, yet the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The hum faded, leaving only silence. I reached for the photograph I had found earlier, now tucked into Catherine's diary. Its edges felt warmer than before, the image of Catherine and Adelaide now starkly clear under the beam of my flashlight. Their postures, so tense and deliberate, took on new meaning as I examined their faces. Catherine's expression was not one of camaraderie, but control. Adelaide's eyes, filled with a defiant sorrow, seemed to plead with me across the decades. Suddenly, a creak from the hallway snapped my attention back to the present. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The door was still ajar, but beyond it, the shadows seemed to deepen unnaturally. The corridor stretched further than it should have, its end swallowed by an inky blackness that no light could penetrate. I stepped into the hall, Catherine's diary clutched tightly in my hands. The hum returned, this time faintly reverberating through the walls. It led me down the corridor, past rooms I hadn't noticed before. Each door was slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of forgotten lives. A child's nursery with a broken rocking horse, a dressing room with a cracked mirror, and a study filled with books so worn their titles were illegible. The hum grew louder as I approached a door at the very end. Unlike the others, this one was closed, its brass handle polished as if it had been used recently. My flashlight flickered as I reached for it, and when I turned the knob, the door swung open with an almost theatrical creak. Inside was a study unlike any I had seen in the manor. The furniture was intact, the books on the shelves free of dust. A fire burned low in the hearth, its embers casting a dim glow across the room. On the desk sat an ornate box, its surface inlaid with intricate designs of roses and angels. The hum was deafening now, emanating from the box itself. I hesitated before approaching, every instinct screaming for me to leave. But the weight of Catherine's diary in my hands urged me forward. When I lifted the box's lid, the hum ceased. Inside, nestled in a bed of velvet, was a single silver key. The key was unlike any I had seen before, its shaft twisted like a vine, the bow shaped into the wings of an angel. Beside it lay a folded piece of parchment, its edges singed. I unfolded it carefully, the handwriting instantly recognizable. The angel guards the truth, but only for those brave enough to claim it. Catherine thinks she has won, but she forgets. Power is fleeting. Truth is eternal. The note was signed with a simple A. My pulse raced as I tucked the key and note into my coat pocket. The fire in the hearth flared suddenly, illuminating the room in a harsh orange glow. I spun toward the door, but it was no longer there. The walls began to close in, the hum returning with a ferocity that rattled the furniture. Catherine's voice echoed through the room, cold and mocking. "You've come so far, Emily, but are you ready for the truth?" The fire roared, and with a final burst of courage, I clutched the key and fled. The corridor beyond was no longer the same. It twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the manor's labyrinthine depths. The hum followed, relentless, as if the house itself was alive, guiding me toward something I wasn't sure I wanted to find. The air inside Thornfield Manor had grown oppressive, thick with the scent of aged wood, and something darker, something alive. As I emerged from the twisting corridors of the East Wing, my steps faltered. The hum that had chased me through the labyrinthine halls faded, replaced by a deafening silence. The silver key in my pocket weighed heavily, its twisted form pressing into my thigh as if urging me forward. I found myself drawn once again to the rose garden. The path outside was shrouded in mist, the evening air cool and damp. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie light over the estate. The garden's blackened roses seemed almost luminous in the silver glow, their thorny stems stretching like grasping fingers. At the heart of the garden stood the stone angel. It loomed larger than I remembered, its weathered surface etched with lines that resembled veins under the moonlight. The angel's face was worn smooth, but its eyeless gaze seemed to follow me as I approached. I hesitated at the edge of the garden, my breath clouding the air before me. The letter, the diary, and now the key. They all pointed to this place, yet every instinct screamed for me to turn back. The moment I stepped into the garden, the world shifted. The air grew colder, the mist thickening until it swallowed the manor behind me. The angel's shadow stretched unnaturally long, its dark fingers curling around me like a cage. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me bathed in the ethereal glow of the moon. As I moved closer to the angel, the silver key in my pocket grew warmer. My hand trembled as I pulled it free. It felt alive, pulsing faintly against my palm. The angel's base, a pedestal of cracked stone, bore an inscription I hadn't noticed before. Beneath the guardian lies the path to the truth. I crouched down, brushing away the overgrown moss and dirt that clung to the pedestal's surface. Beneath the inscription was a keyhole, its shape matching the angelic design of the key. My heart pounded as I fit the key into the lock. The click of the mechanism echoed through the still night like a gunshot. The ground beneath the angel shifted, a hidden trapdoor creaking open to reveal a staircase spiraling into darkness. A rush of air escaped from below, carrying with it the scent of earth and something metallic. I hesitated at the edge of the opening, peering into the abyss. The silver key was still warm in my hand, its glow faint but steady. Catherine's voice whispered in the back of my mind, mocking and insistent. "Are you ready for the truth?" Taking a deep breath, I descended. The stairs were narrow and uneven, carved into the earth itself. My flashlight sputtered as I moved deeper, its dim beam barely illuminating the rough stone walls. The air grew colder with each step, and the oppressive weight of the manor seemed to press down on me even here. As I reached the bottom, the staircase opened into a cavernous space. The walls were lined with stone carvings, their intricate designs depicting scenes of rituals and sacrifices. At the center of the chamber stood an altar, its surface gleaming with symbols that pulsed faintly in the darkness. A low hum filled the space, vibrating through the ground and up into my chest. It was the same sound I had heard in the East Wing, only now it was stronger, almost alive. My gaze was drawn to 3 objects on the altar: a knife, a vial of dark liquid, and a small silver mirror. The carvings on the walls seemed to move in the flickering light of my flashlight, their scenes playing out like a macabre story. Figures in robes surrounded the stone angel, their hands raised as if in supplication. Beneath them lay 3 figures, bound and bleeding, their faces contorted in agony. The inscriptions below the carvings were written in a language I couldn't understand, but Catherine's diary seemed to hum in my coat pocket, its presence demanding my attention. I opened it, the pages turning on their own until they settled on a passage I hadn't seen before. To preserve the truth, 3 must pay the price. Blood, memory, and soul shall bind the secret forever. But beware, for the guardian demands more than sacrifice. It demands submission. The words blurred before my eyes as the hum grew louder. The symbols on the altar began to glow, their light filling the chamber with an unnatural brightness. My flashlight flickered and went out entirely, leaving me bathed in the eerie radiance of the altar. A voice echoed through the cavern, low and commanding. It wasn't Catherine's, nor Adelaide's. It was something older, something ancient. "You have come seeking the truth. Are you prepared to pay its price?" I stumbled back, my hands trembling as I clutched the diary to my chest. What are you?" I managed to whisper. The voice chuckled, a sound that reverberated through the chamber like the grinding of stone. "I am the guardian of the truth you seek. I am the keeper of what lies beyond the veil. But the truth is not given freely. It must be earned." The air around me grew heavy, pressing against my chest like an invisible weight. The hum deepened, resonating in my bones. The carvings on the walls seemed to come alive, their figures twisting and writhing as though trying to escape their confines. The altar's light pulsed, drawing my attention back to the three objects before me. The knife gleamed with a sharpness that seemed to cut the very air around it. The vial of liquid shimmered, its contents swirling like smoke trapped in glass. The mirror's surface was dark, reflecting nothing but the cavern's emptiness. "Choose," the voice commanded. "Blood, memory, or soul. Each will reveal a truth, but only one will lead you to what you seek." My hand shook as I reached for the knife, then hesitated. The carvings on the walls seemed to watch me, their expressions shifting between despair and rage. I looked at the vial, its dark liquid beckoning like a whispered promise. The mirror remained silent, its surface as impenetrable as the shadows around me. The voice grew impatient. "The truth waits for no one. Choose or leave this place and never return." I closed my eyes, the weight of the diary in my hands grounding me. Adelaide's words echoed in my mind. Catherine sought to control the truth, but the truth is not hers to command. When I opened my eyes, my hand reached out, not for the knife or the vial, but for the mirror. The moment my fingers touched its cold surface, the chamber was plunged into darkness. The hum ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't mine. It was Adelaide's. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, but also determination. Her voice whispered through the stillness. "You've made your choice. Now face the consequences." The darkness enveloped me as the chamber fell silent. The mirror in my hands felt impossibly heavy, its surface cold against my trembling fingers. Adelaide's reflection remained, her sorrowful gaze locked with mine. Around us, the walls seemed to pulse faintly, alive with an unseen energy. Her voice echoed in my mind. "Blood, memory, soul. The guardian demands its due." Before I could respond, the mirror began to glow, its surface rippling like liquid silver. Shadows danced within it, forming shapes, faces, and fragments of scenes I couldn't fully understand. The air grew thick, pressing against my chest until it was a struggle to breathe. Then, with a flash of light, the chamber changed. I stood, not in the underground cavern, but in the master bedroom of Thornfield Manor. The room was alive with light, the heavy drapes pulled back to reveal a brilliant moon. Adelaide stood by the window, her back to me, the diary clutched tightly to her chest. "Adelaide?" My voice trembled, uncertain whether she was real or a vision conjured by the mirror. She turned slowly, her face etched with exhaustion and resolve. "You should not have come this far, Emily. The truth is not a gift, it's a burden." "What happened here?" I asked, stepping closer. "What were you trying to protect?" Her grip on the diary tightened. "I wasn't protecting the truth. I was protecting others from it. Catherine sought to twist it, to use it for her own gain. She thought she could command the forces bound to this place, but the manor, it has a will of its own." Adelaide's gaze shifted to the fireplace, where the loose floorboard had concealed her letter. "I tried to warn Thomas. I begged him to see Catherine for what she was, but he was blinded by her beauty, her charm, By the time he understood, it was too late. "What is the truth?" I pressed. "What lies beneath the stone angel?" Her expression darkened, her form flickering like a candle about to go out. "The truth is a cycle. Catherine started it, but it was the manner that demanded its continuation. Blood, memory, soul. 3 sacrifices to bind the power she sought to wield. I was the final sacrifice, but I found a way to delay it. My death wasn't enough to complete the ritual." I felt the weight of her words settle over me like a shroud. "That's why the letter was left. You wanted someone to stop it." Adelaide nodded. "I hoped someone would find the strength to end what I could not. But Emily, you must understand, the manor will not let you leave unscathed. It demands a price." The walls began to ripple, the bedroom dissolving into the cavern once more. The mirror in my hands burned with cold fire, and Adelaide's image faded, her voice lingering like a ghost. "Choose wisely, Emily. The truth cannot be unmade." The chamber's oppressive energy returned in full force as I awoke from the vision. My hand still gripped the mirror, its surface now dark and impenetrable. The altar before me gleamed with unnatural light, its 3 objects, knife, vial, and mirror, resuming their ominous glow. The guardian's voice boomed through the cavern, cold and unyielding. "The truth has spoken. Will you complete the ritual or turn away?" I turned the mirror over in my hands, its surface reflecting not my face, but Catherine's. Her eyes burned with triumph, her smile twisted with malice. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked aloud, my voice echoing off the cavern walls. The guardian chuckled, a sound that reverberated through my bones. "Refusal is an illusion. The manor's power has already marked you. To turn away now would be to leave with nothing but shadows." The knife on the altar gleamed, its blade impossibly sharp. The vial shimmered, its contents swirling with a life of their own. The mirror pulsed in my hands, its cold surface almost alive. Each choice carried its own weight, its own consequences. I stepped closer to the altar, the guardian's voice ringing in my ears. "Blood will bind the cycle. Memory will reveal its cost. Soul will end it forever." The carvings on the walls shifted, depicting scenes of Catherine's ritual, her hands raised in triumph, her face alight with greed. Adelaide knelt beside her, bound and broken, her eyes defiant even in the face of death. I reached for the mirror once more, its surface rippling as I held it high. The cavern trembled, the altar's light flaring brighter than ever. The guardian's voice rose to a deafening roar. "You dare challenge the cycle? The truth will consume you!" I closed my eyes, Adelaide's final words echoing in my mind. "Choose wisely, Emily. The truth cannot be unmade." The mirror's surface rippled like a disturbed pond, casting pale reflections of the altar, the objects, and my trembling hands. Around me, the cavern groaned, its walls alive with shifting carvings of Catherine's cruel ritual. The air crackled with energy, sharp and stifling, pressing against my chest. The guardian's voice thundered, louder now, almost gleeful. "Decide, Emily. Will you perpetuate the truth or destroy it? There is no escape, only choice." The weight of Adelaide's warnings hung heavy in my mind. Blood, memory, soul. Each demanded a sacrifice. Catherine's reflection in the mirror burned into my gaze, her triumphant smirk daring me to falter. She had once stood at this precipice, driven by greed and ambition. She had made her choice, and it had cost her everything. Adelaide's final words whispered through the chaos. "Choose wisely. The truth cannot be unmade." The knife gleamed on the altar, promising finality. The vial shimmered, swirling with potential. The mirror pulsed, alive with the weight of untold secrets. Each object carried its own power, its own destiny. But which path would break the cycle? I stepped forward, holding the mirror aloft. Its surface grew cold, and the guardian's voice softened, almost curious. You choose the mirror? The path of memory? Do you truly wish to bear the weight of truth? Yes, I whispered, though my voice wavered. If this cycle ends with me, so be it. The mirror flared to life, its glow flooding the chamber. Shadows twisted and screamed, unraveling from the walls and ceiling, spiraling toward the altar. Catherine's reflection fought against the light, her voice shrieking in fury. No, you will not undo my work. Her image dissolved into fragments, her face contorted in rage and desperation. You don't understand what you're destroying. This power, this truth, is mine. The carvings on the walls shifted again, depicting Catherine's life unraveling, her betrayal of Adelaide, her cruel experiments, her descent into madness. The mirror absorbed each image, glowing brighter with every scene until the walls were bare, their secrets consumed. The Guardian's voice returned, calm and resolute. You have chosen memory. The cycle is broken, but the truth will remain within you. This burden is yours alone, Emily. A searing pain shot through my chest as the mirror's light entered me, its cold fire spreading through my veins. My vision blurred, and the cavern seemed to collapse around me, the altar crumbling into dust. The objects, knife, vial, and mirror, disintegrated, their power gone. As the light faded, I found myself back in the rose garden. The stone angel stood silent, its features once again worn smooth by time. The roses bloomed bright red, their thorns no longer threatening. The oppressive weight of the manor had lifted, replaced by a strange, heavy stillness. Adelaide's diary rested at my feet, its pages blank except for one final entry in her elegant hand. To bear the truth is to carry the burden of all who came before. Emily, you are free to leave, but the truth will remain with you. Share it wisely, for it can destroy as easily as it can heal. The manor stood quiet now, its windows dark and lifeless. Mrs. Fairfax appeared on the garden path, her face streaked with tears. Emily, is it over? She whispered, her voice fragile. I nodded, though the weight of what I had done pressed heavily on my shoulders. The cycle is broken. Catherine's hold is gone. Her relief was palpable, but her eyes lingered on the diary in my hands. And the truth? It's mine to bear, I said, slipping the diary into my coat pocket. But some truths are better left untold. Together, we walked back toward the manor, the dawn breaking on the horizon. The oppressive shadows that had once clung to Thornfield Manor were gone, replaced by a quiet stillness. Yet, as I crossed the threshold, I knew the manor's story would never truly leave me. Adelaide's final sacrifice had freed the trapped souls, but I remained tethered to the truth, bound by a choice I could never undo. Some nights, when the wind howls through the trees, I still hear the faint echoes of Catherine's laughter and Adelaide's whispers. The villagers whispered of Thornfield Manor for years to come. Some claimed it was cursed, while others insisted its shadows held secrets too dangerous to reveal. I returned only once, years later, to place the diary beneath the stone angel where it belonged. As I stood in the rose garden one last time, the wind carried Adelaide's voice, faint but unmistakable. Thank you, Emily. The truth is safe now. And with that, Thornfield Manor's story became a part of me, a truth I would carry until the end of my days. For in breaking the cycle, I had become its final guardian, a keeper of secrets that could never be unmade.